Rumor tells me that you're planning a visit to Cedar Point. Good choice. This park has a lot to offer with its huge collection of roller coasters that each are legendary in their own right. Not only that, but this is one huge park. At 364 acres, it takes some endurance to get around the park. I've made this video in an effort to save you some much needed time and hopefully help you conquer this park as effectively as possible. So join me as we dive into this video talking about how you can have the best day at Cedar Point. Like the video I made for Kings Island of this style, I'm going to be breaking this video down into 3 different segments. What to do before visiting the park, what to do once your plans are locked in, and what to do once you're at the park. At the end of this video, it's my goal to have you as prepared as possible to have an unforgettable visit at this extraordinary park. Making these videos for you guys takes a lot of work, so I really appreciate all of the support you're giving me. Every like, view, comment, and subscription really helps me out a lot, but if you feel like helping me out further, check out my Patreon. For just $1 a month, you can help me in my journey to bring even more of this high quality content to you guys. During this video, I'm going to have this audio cue when I have a secret tip. These ones are super important and can help give you an edge above the crowd. I will also be discussing the best times to ride the major coasters like Steel Vengeance, and what rows you should ride it in. I will also be discussing whether or not the Fast Pass is worth it when visiting the park, so stay tuned. What makes this park so legendary is not just the coasters, but the overall package. Let's say you are getting tired and want to spend some time away from the amusement park? Well, don't fret. There's a beach right next to the park that anyone can access. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Like most amusement parks, there are some steps you should take to prepare before visiting. This would include things like what you should wear and where you should be staying. This is where we'll be discussing park entry options like tickets, as well as whether or not it's worth it to get the dining pass. Tip number 1, pick the right hotel for you. Arguably, the best hotel to stay based on experience alone is at Hotel Breakers, which is on the site of Cedar Point. By staying here, you get to save money on parking passes, and you get access to the best entrance Cedar Point has by far, the Magnum entrance. If this isn't within your budget, there are other options close by, such as Cedar Point's Express Hotel, which has prices that are a bit more affordable and is within 2 miles of the parking gates. There are many other options, but these 2 arguably give the best access to the park itself. Hotel Breakers can be on the more expensive side, but if it is within your budget, it is well worth it. There are other on-site options like Lighthouse Point, which is great if you have an RV, but this does require a bit more walking to get to the park. Either way, these on-site options really are the bee's knees when it comes to visiting. You can easily access the hotel from the park, meaning that if at any point you need to take a break or stop by your room to grab something, you won't be missing too much of your day here. Tip number 2, know what to wear. I've mentioned it in other videos and I'll mention it here. The Thuzies are right about some things. Cargo shorts. These come in a wide variety of designs, but the key here is that you get ones with zipper pockets. If your pockets utilize buttons, things could easily slip out. Next, you need to have comfortable shoes. If this video was sponsored by them, I'd be raving on and on about the Hokas I'm wearing, since they are a game changer. Next, a good t-shirt. Depending on the temperatures, there's a good chance you'll be sweating a decent bit, so you'll want a light colored t-shirt made with good materials to keep you cool. In this case, athletic shirts can actually be a good option. Since this is in Ohio, temperatures can get pretty cool later in the day, so it might also be a good idea to bring along a light jacket with you. Once again, I really want to emphasize the importance of wearing proper shoes. You're going to do a ton of walking here, and nearly all of it will be on either concrete or asphalt. Tip number 3, know what to bring. As with any theme park trip that I go on, I have always found it to be a good idea to bring a small backpack. This ensures you can bring all the necessities like pain meds, hand sanitizer, small snacks, a hydro flask, and more. This is a topic I might do later, as picking the right backpack is a quest I've been on for quite a while. You generally don't want to bring one that's too large and pack it full of everything you could possibly need. Cedar Point is huge, and the lighter, the better. One final thing that I would recommend bringing is a portable charger. You're going to be most likely spending your entire day at the park and presumably taking a lot of photos, consulting the park app for information, or generally getting distracted by whatever it is you do on your phone. The last thing you want is to have your phone dying on you while you're still at the park. Tip number 4, plan to spend at least 2 to 4 days here. From the front entry gate to Steel Vengeance is at least a mile walk. To put it lightly, Cedar Point is huge. On average, this park sees about 3.5 million people attending the park annually, so while the numbers aren't the biggest in the nation, it's still the 14th highest attended amusement park in the entire country. This, plus the emphasis on the larger coasters, means that Cedar Point has huge crowds. This is why visiting for one day isn't enough, especially if you're planning on trying to experience most of the park while you're here. Add on to the fact that from walkway to walkway, the park is about a quarter mile wide. It's big. To put this in another perspective, if your average walking speed is 3 miles per hour, then it would take you roughly 20 minutes to walk from one end to the other. With lines at major rides hitting wait times of at least an hour shortly after the park opens, and a total of 17 roller coasters on the property, one day won't cut it. Spending a total of 4 days here would actually be a bit overkill, but this is for those of you who really want to try to experience everything that the park has to offer. Tip number 5, pick the best time to visit. This is one of the key foundational parts of planning a successful trip to Cedar Point. Your timing could make or break your experience here, so be smart. Arguably, the best time to visit would be weekends in May or later in the season like August or September. One key takeaway here, if you're visiting when the park is open 7 days a week, always visit on weekdays. The crowds will be much more manageable here, so this will ensure that you have a better chance to do everything you want to. Visiting at these times also helps save some money in that it means that hotel prices are going to be slightly lower. Tip number 6, use these resources to help with planning. When picking out the best day to go, there are several websites like isitpacked.com and qtimes.com, which are a great resource for helping to anticipate what crowd levels could be. Something I should note here, these websites are not 100% accurate and only give an estimation of what they think crowds will be like on a day-to-day basis. They get most of their data from historical figures, so keep this in mind when visiting them. Alright, it's time for our first secret tip. Use Cedar Point's Fast Pass prices to anticipate crowd levels. If you want an extra secret resource to check potential crowd levels, then look at the online prices of Fast Passes. These can change based on the anticipated crowd levels that the leadership of Cedar Point have determined will be likely. If the passes are more expensive, then expect it to have larger crowds on those days. Tip number 7. Try visiting during the special events. Katie and I were lucky enough to catch the 150th anniversary celebration when we visited the park, and we're very glad we did. Throughout the operating season, Cedar Point puts on a lot of different special events, and you won't want to miss these. They include live performances, fireworks shows, parades, and more. You can easily find information about when these are going on through the Cedar Point official website, or through the app. Tip number 8. Pre-purchase park entry or season passes online. Speaking of the website, this is where you want to go to purchase your entry tickets or season passes. When buying individual tickets, it is significantly cheaper and quicker to buy them online. It prevents you from having to wait in line at the ticket counter, which is not a quick process at all. Tip number 9. Consider getting the all-park passport if you plan on visiting Kings Island. Unfortunately, Cedar Fair decided to stop including entry to all parks in their Platinum passes, so now you have to purchase the All Park Passport if you want to visit other parks in the chain for the year. Despite this, if you are planning on spending any time at the nearby Kings Island or at any other park in the Cedar Fair chain, I highly recommend getting this All Park Passport so you can save yourself a lot of money. Tip number 10, try out the Dining Pass. Even if you're only spending a single day at the park, the dining plan is an insanely good option and shouldn't be skipped out on. A meal for a single person can cost as much as $30, so by having a meal plan, you'll be spending roughly half of what you would otherwise. Doing the all-season dining plan similarly can save you even more money and pays for itself in less than 4 meals. Tip number 11, download the Cedar Point app. I will probably state this tip in just about every video. If the park has an app, you want to download it. These are great for getting not only live wait times and ride closures, but also for finding information on shows and having a digital park map. It's available on both Android and iOS, meaning unless you have a flip phone, you can download the app. These apps have a pretty decent filtering option, so you can find exactly what you need, be it restrooms, rides, restaurants, and more. Tip number 12, figure out if the fast passes are worth it. If you watched my video a couple weeks ago about fast passes, you may remember me freaking out about the prices of Fastlane at Cedar Point. Let's face it, Cedar Point's Fastlane prices are pretty steep. I would really only recommend paying for them if you either have limited time at the park or just have a ton of cash to burn. Yes, the lines can get very long here, but if you focus more on planning your trip out better, you're more likely to spend less time waiting in line without having to pay the extra cost. In this case, the regular Fastlane doesn't offer its benefits at the rides that generally have longer waits. So this means that if you want to skip the biggest lines at the park, you're looking at spending at least $115 for Fastlane Plus. It's obvious why it's designed like this, but it's quite steep. Time for our second secret tip. Take advantage of your Season Pass benefits. As a Gold or Prestige Season Pass holder, you are granted a Bring a Friend discount. If someone in your group doesn't have a Season Pass, you can easily save them money at the gate with these discounts. I would highly recommend to keep this pricing in the budget to make sure whether or not this option is cheaper or more expensive for your group when visiting. Now that you've picked out when you're going and all that, we should dial in more and figure out what to do while you're at the park proper. This is where going to this park turns into a game of chess. You really need to plan on making the right moves so that you beat the crowds. Tip number 13, know where your entry options are. Did you know that Cedar Point has 4 separate entrances? There's obviously the main gates at the front of the park. Next, there's the gate near Valraven, then the one next to Windseeker, and finally the gate near Magnum XL200. If you have a boat, you can consider parking it at the docks and going into the park through the Valraven entrance. Under most circumstances, you generally want to avoid the Windseeker entrance. This leaves the main gate and the Magnum entrances. The main gate is where most people enter from, but the Magnum entrance can be utilized if you're staying at the Hotel Breakers or Lighthouse Point. I might say though that this year it could potentially be a good option to start at the Windseeker entrance, since for early entry you have both Wild Mouse and Gatekeeper open. Tip number 14, plan on arriving at least 45 minutes early to the parking gate. If you're not staying on the property, then you've got to enter the parking lot from the main gate like everyone else. In my opinion, it is a good idea to get here at least 45 minutes early so you can get a better parking spot. Some people don't really care about this. Here's why I think it's important. Cedar Point is a huge park. Duh, I sound like a broken record. You're going to be doing a lot of walking and standing throughout the entire day, and after all of that, would you really want to have to walk even further just to get to your car? I sure wouldn't. Not only does getting to the parking gate early give you a chance at finding a better parking spot, it gets you through park entry quicker. Time for our next secret tip. If staying at Hotel Breakers, plan on getting to the Magnum XL200 gate 45 minutes prior to early entry. On a similar note to the previous tip, you also want to try to skip the line at the Magnum entry gate if you're staying on the Cedar Point property. It's pretty much guaranteed that most of these people will be following a similar path, so be sure to get here early so that you aren't bogged down in a small crowd. Tip number 15. If going with a group, assign a leader. This one is generally a good tip for any vacation you're planning, as it can help ease a lot of conflict. Some people are great at figuring things out democratically, but this isn't always the case. This is why it is always a good idea to assign someone to lead your group. Preferably someone who can make quick decisions while keeping the interests of the group in mind would be your best pick. If this isn't something you can accommodate, then I would highly recommend sorting out your itinerary before visiting the park. There's a good chance it will be fairly hot when you're there, and you might be dehydrated at various parts of the day, which can increase the amount of tension present in any group dynamic. Tip number 16. Save at least $150 to bring with you into the park. I've mentioned previously that a meal for a single person can cost roughly $30. Having at least $150 to your name is a good idea for a single day here, so that you can pay for meals, lockers, and any additional things like snacks, on-ride photos, and souvenirs. You most likely could get by spending a lot less than this, but generally I feel like this is a fairly safe amount of money to have ready. Tip number 17. Know where the best places to eat are. Just a few years ago, Cedar Point didn't really have all that many great food options. Since then, they've improved a lot, so here are my top 5 restaurants to eat at. Number 5, Melt Bar and Grilled. Number 4, Chickies and Pete's. Number 3, Hugo's Italian Kitchen. Number 2, Backbeat Q. And finally, number 1, the Grand Pavilion. This last one is a great one to catch some nice air conditioning and grab some great food. Arguably the best in the park. Tip number 18. Know which flat rides are the best. In total, Cedar Point boasts over 70 rides, many of which offer incredibly unique experiences. When it comes to the flat rides, these 5 are the must-try experiences and should be included in your plans. Number 5, Giant Wheel. Number 4, Power Tower. Number 3, Cedar Point and Lake Erie Railroad. Number 2, Skyride. Number 1, Skyhawk. The Giant Wheel is great for getting awesome views of the park at any time of the day and provides a nice and relaxing break from all of the constant walking and standing. When it comes to transport rides, both the Railroad and Skyride are amazing ways to save your feet and get around the park a little bit easier. Just as a warning, however, using these can be a bit slower than walking due to the loading and unloading times. Finally, we have Skyhawk. This S&S Scream and Swing provides a ton of weightlessness and is one of my new favorite types of flat rides. As an honorable mention, I'd highly recommend riding the Cedar Downs Racing Derby. This could probably be one of the most unique carousels you could get the chance to ride. Tip number 19. Know which coasters are the best. With the opening of Top Thrill 2 on the horizon, the ride lineup can possibly be shaken up a bit, but these are the roller coasters you don't want to miss. Number 5, Magnum XL 200. Number 4, Millennium Force. Number 3, Top Thrill 2. Number 2, Maverick. And number 1, Steel Vengeance. Magnum is always a great choice as your first hypercoaster, but make sure to ride in the best seats on this ride. Stay tuned for later in the video where I discuss which seats to ride in, as well as the rest of the coasters at this park. These rides, being the best at the park, also mean that they are going to have some of the longest lines here, too. Tip number 20. Make a checklist of all the things you plan on bringing with you to the park. I mentioned earlier how you should bring a small backpack filled with all the essentials you might need. I know this doesn't apply to everyone, but I can tend to be very forgetful, so having a written checklist I can consult before leaving my hotel has been a lifesaver. Make sure to write down all of the things you plan on bringing with you to the park and double check it before you leave. When I say everything, I mean everything, including the clothes on your back. You really wouldn't want to forget those. Tip number 21. Either list or visually plot out your route using the park map available online or through the app. Later in the video, I'm going to give you a rundown of what I believe is the ideal itinerary for how to conquer this park. Even then, I wouldn't expect you or myself to remember every detail about this plan, so make sure to visually write down what your plans are exactly, so you can consult back to these. In my opinion, when you're in the meat grinder, it's always a good idea to keep a list of goals and a plan handy, so that way you can stay on track. You can easily draw on the map itself by taking a screenshot of the map with your phone and using the included markup tools available inside the default photo gallery apps. This will allow you to visually chart out your path, or you can always use a list instead. Tip number 22. Eat a small but filling breakfast snack before visiting the park. Since you're planning on being jostled about all day long, I highly recommend at least eating a small snack for breakfast before going to the park. You want to start the day off right. Even if you plan on having a proper breakfast, I would still recommend to keep it fairly light so as to ensure you don't feel sluggish and bogged down for most of your day at the park. We've got most of the planning out of the way. Now is the time to put that planning to the test. Keep watching as we're about to dive into the perfect itinerary for how to absolutely master this park. And stay tuned, especially if you like content creation, as I have some great recommendations for some awesome photo opportunities later in this section. Tip number 23, mark your spot. This is just a good tip in general. If you're parking in the main lot in front of the park, either screenshot your location on your phone's map where you park, or take a picture of one of the nearby signs to denote where you're parked. There's nothing like spending an entire day at an amusement park, walking around and spending even more time trying to figure out where your car is. Tip number 24. If you're staying at Hotel Breakers, don't forget to pick up your early entry pass before leaving. Even if you have a season pass, there's a special early entry pass that you can get from the main counter at Hotel Breakers that allows you in the entrance near Magnum. Don't forget to pick this up on your way out of the hotel. Tip number 25. Get an all-day locker. To use the locker for 2 hours, you're looking at paying $2. There's a good chance you'll be using quite a few lockers throughout your time at the park, so I'd recommend skipping to the all-day locker pass that costs $8. This gives you a code that you can input at almost any locker in the park and move your stuff to for the rides that require them. There isn't a huge amount of rides here that do, but for the ones that do, this will save you some money by going this route. Tip number 26. If you're staying at Hotel Breakers, follow this itinerary. Like I mentioned previously, you need to start out by getting to the Magnum XL 200 gate 45 minutes before they open. From here, there are a couple of options you have based on what rides are open for early entry. This year, in 2024, the only coasters open for early entry are Iron Dragon, Millennium Force, Gatekeeper, and Wild Mouse. This means your options are fairly limited. You could walk due south to Millennium Force and ride it as early as possible, but note that this walking distance is roughly half a mile. Ideally, this is your best bet, however. If you're walking at a normal pace, it will take you roughly 10 minutes to get here. Since Iron Dragon is open for early entry, you might want to consider stopping here for a walk-on ride that it'll be. After riding Millennium, you're most likely going to be sitting at roughly 9:15. This is where one of the hardest parts of your day comes. Once you get your walk-on ride of Millennium Force, you need to head straight to either Maverick or Steel Vengeance. This walk is almost another half mile, so by now it should be roughly about 9:30. At this point, take a breather. Once it opens at 10 a.m., get your ride on Maverick, then head straight towards Steel Vengeance. Now, by this point, Vengeance probably has a bit of a line, but it shouldn't be anywhere near as bad as it could be. For most people entering the park from the main entrance, they should be arriving at Maverick and Steel Vengeance about 30 minutes from opening if they avoided the rides at the front of the park. The reason I recommend doing Maverick first is that its throughput is much lower than Steel Vengeance, so the line ends up being fairly long throughout the entire day. From here, you want to get on Top Thrill 2 as early as possible. There's a good chance that this ride is going to have a fairly long line, and it may even have some teething issues which could cause frequent, but quickly resolved breakdowns. The line for this is more than likely going to be longer, but that's okay. this will most likely be one of the few longer lines you wait at. Once you've gotten off Top Thrill 2, now would be a great time to sweep up some of the other credits nearby. I would recommend heading back to Magnum XL 200, then Gemini. From here, your next closest ride will be Cedar Creek Mine Ride, which generally doesn't get the longest of lines. By now, you're probably looking for a good way to cool off, so I would recommend hitting Snake River Falls or Thunder Canyon. At this point, you're probably getting fairly hungry, so if it's after 1:30, now would be a great time to grab a bite to eat. After this, look at the live wait times on the app and check out how the lines are for the rides at the front of the park. If they've slowed down a bit, head towards Rougarou first and knock it out of the way. From here, you want to hit Valraven, Raptor, Gatekeeper, and Corkscrew. Keep a close eye on the live wait times, as Wild Mouse would be good to knock out here as well. Ideally, you want to time it so that you can avoid the long line it will most likely have. Fortunately though, the major B&Ms at the front of the park have a really high throughput, so each of these will have lines that should move fairly quickly. Please note that Gatekeeper can sometimes be the outlier here, since it is directly at the front of the park. Tip number 27. If you're entering from the front of the park, follow this itinerary. Because of the rides that are selected for early entry, coming in from the front of the park almost sets you up a little better for success. If you head straight to the back of the park, be ready for a long walk. It'll take you close to 30 minutes to get to these rides from the front of the park. In my opinion, it might be a good idea to knock out some of the rides towards the front early so that you can spend time getting to the back of the park a little bit later. If you can time it correctly, walk fast to Gatekeeper and get a walk-on ride there, and skip over to Wild Mouse. It should take you close to 10 minutes to get to Gatekeeper. From here, move on to Millennium Force. If you've gone straight from one ride to another, the best time you're looking at will be at about anywhere from 9:20 to 9:40 a.m. After getting off of Millennium, you want to make a mad dash to either Maverick or Steel Vengeance. Ideally, you should be at one of these rides no later than 10:05. By going this route, you're avoiding the potentially longer lines that you might encounter at Wild Mouse, Millennium Force, and Gatekeeper. Keep in mind, however, that if you want to ride one of the first trains of the day on either Maverick or Steel Vengeance, then my only recommendation would be to head straight to the back of the park. This means you will be skipping many of the other rides, so I don't personally recommend doing this. Once you have finished riding the two major coasters at the back of the park, the rest of the itinerary looks fairly similar to the previous one. Knock out the final major coaster with Top Thrill 2, then sweep up the rest as the day goes on. Tip number 28, stay hydrated. As you can tell, there is a ton of walking you'll be doing while you're at the park. It should also be noted that Cedar Point doesn't have a huge amount of shade, so I highly recommend following the daily recommended water intake. For men, that means drinking roughly 104 ounces of water in a day, and for women, that means 72 ounces. The most common size of hydro flask I've seen carries roughly 32 ounces of water, so you want to drink this and refill it roughly 3 times over. It seems like a lot, but this is a really good amount to keep yourself hydrated throughout the day. Tip number 29. Watch out for the mayflies. I personally haven't experienced this, but be careful opening your mouth on some of the larger coasters here. There are often a ton of mayflies flying around the park during summer, and it's not uncommon for you to get a protein-filled snack while riding the coasters. So do yourself a favor and maybe try to skip out on the screaming on some of the larger rides, if you can help it. Tip number 30, know which seats are the best for each ride. With a list of 17 coasters, I'm going to go through this one fairly fast. Take note, I'm going to be skipping over the kiddie coasters as well as Wild Mouse, since the seating isn't as important here. So to start from the smallest to largest, Blue Streak, this is a back row ride. This classic coaster provides a small amount of airtime, and the biggest sensation of it that you can get is in the back row. Cedar Creek Mine Ride. This one isn't so important, but if you like visibility, then the front row. If you like being whipped around by the rest of the train, the back row. Corkscrew, front row. Iron Dragon, any row is fine, but the front row provides the best view. Gemini, I would recommend either the very front or the very back row on this one. Rougarou, any row will suffice here. If you're not in the front or back, I would highly recommend the outside seats on either side of the cars. Raptor. It's a similar story to Rougarou, but the front is a little better here. I might also recommend the seats on the right side a bit more here. Gatekeeper. Any row is fine. Front row is good, but again, make sure to sit on the right side as it makes the first drop even better. Valraven. Front row. Always the front row. Maverick. This one can be a bit of a toss-up. I like the first drop in the back row, but a lot of the rest of the experience can be really good in the front. Magnum XL200. This one is super important. So if you aren't in the know, on a roller coaster, you ride in what is called a train. This train is made up of individual cars. Each car has 3 rows of seats on Magnum XL200. There are 6 cars per train on this coaster, and you want to specifically sit in the 3rd row of car 1, otherwise known as the magic seat. This magic seat is the best way to experience this ride and provides for some insane airtime on the second half of the ride. Steel Vengeance. This is an RMC, so almost every row is going to be good, but the back row is king if you want to get a ton of airtime on the first drop. The front row is still really good here, however. Millennium Force. There is no better row to experience this coaster than the front. The sense of speed that you get from it is unmatched. And finally, Top Thrill 2. It'll be interesting to see how this pans out since I haven't ridden it yet, but based off my experience off the original Top Thrill Dragster, you want to ride in the front if you want the crazy sense of speed, and you want to ride in the back row if you want the pop of airtime over the top hat. Your choice on this one. Tip number 31, know the best ways to cool off. Cedar Point has 2 major water rides, both located in Frontier Town, that are a great option for you to cool yourself off. I personally would recommend Snake River Falls over Thunder Canyon, as you get absolutely soaked on this ride. Fortunately, there are dryers next to the exit that you can use. Tip number 32, figure out if Cedar Point Shores is worth it. If you're weird like me, then you may not be the biggest fan of water parks. For the rest of you out there, from what I can tell, Cedar Point Shores is a decent water park with a lot of attractions on offer. This could be a great way to cool down and take things a little easier for a while. This water park isn't the best one out there, but it has the capacity to handle larger crowds. Tip number 33, use the transport rides as actual transportation. Both of the major transport rides here are positioned in a way that makes them very convenient for getting from one end of the park to the other. You can easily enter the Sky Ride right at the front of the boardwalk, then head straight towards the train station next to Millennium Force. Once you get off this train, you'll be exiting right next to Steel Vengeance. I highly recommend sitting on the right side of the train in order to get some great views of Millennium Force and Maverick. Tip number 34, use the additional days at the park wisely. The itinerary I developed should serve more as a day 1 type of guide to follow. If you're spending multiple days at the park like I recommend, I still think it's a good idea to follow through with that itinerary. After the first day is over, it's a good idea to pace yourself on the next days visiting the park. I still highly recommend keeping an eye on the wait times so you don't get stuck waiting in line the whole time you're at the park, but take it easy. Tip number 35, eat your meals later or earlier than the rushes. From about noon to 1:30 p.m., most of the restaurants in the park experience a rush where everyone is trying to eat lunch. I would highly recommend for you to either get your food no later than 11:30 a.m. or after 1:30 p.m. so you don't have to wait in a long line. Tip number 36. If you have kids with you, check out Planet Snoopy, Camp Snoopy, and Kitty Kingdom. Cedar Point doesn't have the largest offerings for smaller children, but if you do bring them, these areas are the places to take them. Both Planet Snoopy and Camp Snoopy are the better children's areas, whereas Kitty Kingdom could probably see some much needed updating. Tip number 37. If you're staying at one of the on-site hotels, consider taking a break later in the afternoon. Back on my point of pacing yourself, you should really make sure to listen to your body and take care of yourself. If you are getting really tired, take a break. It is especially helpful when you're staying at Hotel Breakers, as it's right next to the park. This will give you a chance to take a rest, clean yourself up, and generally freshen yourself up before getting back to the park. Tip number 38, don't skimp out on the beach. One thing that makes Cedar Point unique is its location. Situated on the northeastern side of the park is a beach. This is a great place to take a break and get some incredible views of Gatekeeper. The other thing I really like about the beach, anyone can go to it. You don't have to have a room booked at Hotel Breakers to visit the beach or any other special entry. Tip number 39, check out the special experiences the park offers. Did you know that Cedar Point offers a lot of other things other than riding roller coasters? If you look online, you can see that they offer things like riding a jet ski, paragliding, horseback riding for little ones. Heck, there's even a small petting zoo. Tip number 40, check out the best gift shops in the park. This park is full of a ton of gift shops dotted all throughout, but here are the top 5 gift shops I recommend visiting. Number 5, the General Store. Number 4, Speed Zone. Number 3, Cedar Creek Trading Company. Number 2, CP Shop. And finally, number 1, Point Plaza. There are many other gift shops around the park, but these are the ones I've had the best luck at finding souvenirs that I really like. Time for our next secret tip. On the Frontier Trails section of the park, near the Trail Tavern, near the seating area, is a wooden outhouse with a moon cut into the door. Pull on this handle. You actually can't go into this outhouse, but there's a funny Easter egg that has been put in here. Try pulling it multiple times and listen closely, as there's actually a decent variety of things the old man inside will say. Tip number 41, know the best places for dessert. If you're looking for a sweet treat while you're here, check out these top 3 dessert choices. Number 3, macarons. These are found at the French Quarter. Number 2, funnel cakes. These can be found at a large number of different dessert shops around the park. Number 1, elephant ears. These can also be found at French Quarter by the front of the park, or the stockade near the back of the park. As you can probably tell, the French Quarter is the best place in the park to get your dessert, bar none. Tip number 42, check out the Sunrise Thrills VIP tour. This tour offering is unlike what a lot of other parks offer. With this, you get a guided walk up the lift hill of Valraven, and even get access to some behind the scenes areas of Millennium Force, Maverick, and Steel Vengeance. If you're a coaster nerd like myself, you can't miss this tour. Tip number 43, know which are the best night rides. The philosophy behind this one is fairly simple. The larger rides are the better night rides. This would include Millennium Force, Magnum XL 200, Steel Vengeance, and Top Thrill 2. I would also highly recommend Maverick, as it is fairly dark in the ride area. Once again, don't sleep on getting a ride on the giant wheel at night. This can give you incredible views of the lights that will be on at the rest of the park and provide for some great photo opportunities. Tip number 44. If you're staying at Hotel Breakers, enjoy the views. If you can convince yourself to wake up early for the sunrise, go for it. There is nothing quite like catching the views of Cedar Point as the sun comes up. In fact, why not stop at the beach and admire the view next to Gatekeeper? There's nothing quite like standing next to this behemoth when it's baked in glorious sunlight. Tip number 45, check out these spots for taking great photos. Speaking of photo opportunities, these are the spots you don't want to miss if you're a content creator like myself. First, we have this spot right at the front of the parking lot. This gives you some awesome views of Gatekeeper and can also wrap around to the beach as well. Next, we have this area next to Magnum XL 200, all the way up the beach. You can catch some iconic views of this Aero hypercoaster that you won't want to miss. Moving on, we have this section inside the ride area of Steel Vengeance. Be warned about this one. Katie and I were fine going to this spot, but it may or may not be closed off when you go. If it isn't closed off, you can get some unique views of Steel Vengeance that are great for photos and videos. Please note that if a staff member asks you to leave this area, then please just listen to them. As far as I know, for the 2024 season, this next area of the park may be closed off. In 2021, it wasn't. Right here on the island in the center of the park, there at least was an obstacle course for children that you could walk on. All throughout this area are unique views of Millennium Force, Cedar Creek Mine Ride, Rougarou, and Top Thrill Dragster. There are just a ton of coasters you can see from here. Second to last, we have the train. I mentioned earlier that the right side is the best side if you want to get some awesome views of Millennium Force and Maverick. This same rule applies on the way to the station from Frontier Town to the Millennium Force station. The right side gives you the best views of Cedar Creek Mine Ride. Finally, there's the giant wheel. For getting those shots above the park of the largest rides in the distance, you can't beat the views you get from here, especially at night. Hopefully, after watching this guide video, you can be prepared to have an amazing time at this massive amusement park. Cedar Point is one of those places you can't experience once. When you get the chance to go for the first time, you'll most likely be itching to go back again and again. That is why, for any of the coaster enthusiasts out there, you can't skip out on going here. There truly is no other park out there like this one. Thank you so much for watching this video. Don't forget to leave a like and comment below and hit that bell icon. Special thanks to our Patreon supporter, Future Collective. $1 a month helps me bring even more content to you guys, and I even have some exclusive content coming, so check it out. Check the description below to find links to the rest of our pages. Thanks for watching the video, and ride on, Coaster Maniacs!